Thank you, sir. Okay, we are calling to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the town of Ashford for Monday, May 13th. It is 7:01. First order of business is call to order, which we just did, and the seating of the alternates. And right now, as I see it, I don't have Richard, Jerry, or Mark. Speak up if I am not seeing you for some reason and you're on. Okay, hearing that, then Alex, we're gonna seat you for Jerry. And Steve Pesh will seat you for Richard. Okay, very good. So for Jerry and for Richard. All right, moving on. Approval of the minutes of April 8th meeting, April 8th, 2024. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion, Jeff.
Jeff Schillinger, thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
I'll second.
that.
Yeah.
Janet, second that?
Yep.
And any discussion, changes, issues to fix, things that were missed?
Yeah, I have a change. On the last page, the paragraph before number 7, unfinished business.
Yes.
On the paragraph that starts, our legal counsel should review our current permitting process. I believe that paragraph should go under the unfinished business, talking about the IID zone. Not about the housing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, it fits much better there. Actually, it could even have gone under, well. No, yeah, it would better go under there, because I think it started out at the, actually the public comment section, that whole discussion, but, okay, so we'll make that change of that paragraph moving into the unfinished business. B, discussion of the IID zone. Any others? Any other changes or issues? With that, so if we make that single change, can I get a motion to accept the corrected minutes?
So moved, Janet.
Janet, a second for that?
Second, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. All those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstentions, if you weren't here?
Abstention.
Luther, abstention? So moved. Thank you very much. I'm going to open up for public comment for items not listed on the agenda. And first hand I see is Christina Sebo. Go right ahead, please.
Good evening, Christina Sebo, 91 Perry Hill Road. I wrote a letter to the PZC in April as a response to the letter from the Economic Development Commission that stated their suggestions for updates to regulations for the IID zone. I was hoping it would be viewed for the April PZC meeting, but I missed the agenda deadline. I'd hoped it would then be viewed for tonight's meeting, but I understand from Mike that he intends to put all of the letters about that issue, of which I gather there are a number, pertaining to that issue, into a folder for a meeting where there is an actual proposal for regulation changes to be discussed. Having worked on these kinds of things before, I know that once a document or proposal is drafted, those involved tend to sit back a little and diminish their efforts. And then the draft proposal starts to harden into concrete. I think it's important for the letters from the community about this issue be viewed before a proposal is drafted or while it's being drafted. So recommendations and comments might be heard by the commissioners at the most critical time in the process. That is before and during the crafting of proposed changes. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you very much. And to that end, my intent in getting a approval for adding it to the agenda was to, since you did submit but missed last month's, and last month's probably should have carried over to this month's with your submission. I was planning on reading your letter into the record tonight, with approval and movement onto the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for your comments also.
Okay, does that, what, I gather that there are other letters, so what's happening to them? About,
I have not seen them submitted to be read or shared at the meetings at this point. Mike, do you have anything that you want to share? Have you seen? Do we have a number of those?
We had a couple of emails or more than a couple of emails had come in to me sort of in the same format as the previous application where people were sending me emails saying, please vote no on this. I am not in favor of this, and referencing warehouse and IID zone and etc. My response back has been, there is no application, there is no public hearing. And for the commission to consider these things in their deliberations on a future application, they will need to be part of the public hearing record. But I wanted people to not be confused that there was an application that they should be trying to follow or participate in at this point. So I can't remember my words or my emails back directly, but it was along the lines of, when an application is submitted, these comments become part of the record.
And I'm fine with something like that, as opposed to more lengthy letters that are being shared with information such as Mrs. Debo's and Ms. Roy's from last period. So that's fine. I'm good with that.
and also the difference is whether they're about changing the regulations or about something like a text amendment or a project. I mean, you're changing the regulations right now, so that is an active process.
Right, as opposed to them commenting on something, as Mike stated, that isn't in the works. There's not a hearing, there's not a vote really.
Right.
Affecting it. Thank you. Okay. Any other public comment out there? Seeing no hands or waving at me, or electronic hands or otherwise. Okay, we will move on to bills. The only bill I received, Mike, unless you had something else, was for the recording secretary fees for 4 months of activity.
I don't have anything else because we didn't have a new hearing last month.
Right. Okay, very good. All right. Moving on to correspondence. If I could get a motion or allow for a motion that allows the letter from Mrs. Ebo to be placed onto the correspondence. Again, it was submitted late for the April meeting and probably should have just carried over and been submitted, but I think it's much more direct than some of the others. Please vote no, please vote yes. So is there a motion from the commission to allow this letter to be read and added to the agenda? Janet motions, I believe, with a wave of the hand, since to get it on record.
I'll say it out loud. Yes, I'll make the motion.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I'll second. Oh,
Alex seconds.
Yes.
Thank you. All those in favor of adding to the agenda the letter from Mrs. Ebo,
Aye. Aye.
signify by saying aye. Thank you. I'll give you some direction. Those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay, here is that letter. To the Ashford Planning and Zoning Commission, I am writing in response to the thoughtful letter from the Economic Development Commission with their recommendations for changing the zoning regulations for the IID zone. Although I agree it is important to consider ways to bring more income to the town, I think their version of the IID zone is not in the best interest of the citizens of Ashford and would not protect the vital environmental resources of that area. A large number of Ashford citizens wrote letters and spoke at the public hearings about last year's text amendment proposal. Our voices resounded in dismay and protest against proposed regulation changes that would allow massive buildings to be built on the pristine watershed of two rivers that supply drinking water to a large portion of Wyndham. We are alarmed at the prospect of noise, water, and light pollution, increased traffic, and loss of the rural character of our town that would be forced on us by out-of-state developers and/or business if such large-scale development occurred at the gateway to Ashford and to the last Green Valley. Responses to the survey of citizens in December echoed these same fears. Manufacturing was indicated as an inappropriate use by 51% and as appropriate use by only 29% of respondents. In contrast, the EDC would like to ensure that allowable uses would include warehouse and distribution functions, uses in scale and environmental impact most closely related to manufacturing. Letters and statements at the public hearings were overwhelmingly opposed to the inclusion of these uses. Also addressed by the residents at both the public hearing and in the survey was preferred building size. Letters and spoken statements were again adamant that massive buildings should not be allowed in the IID zone, and that even the current allowable building size may not be appropriate given steep slopes and bedrock likely containing pyrite. The survey responses showed that 79% felt building in the IID zone should be 250,000 square feet or less. 45% wanted smaller, 34% wanted to maintain current permanent size of 250,000 square feet. To see what a new 202,000 square foot Amazon facility in Plainfield looks like from above, look at the picture below and imagine something twice this size. Now, that building was shared, I believe, by Christine at the last meeting. So she shared that picture of the building. So it's a part of the record from the last meeting that was shared. Please listen to what the citizens of this town have been saying and craft new regulations that require scientific analysis of the land by unbiased experts and that contain language that protects our town from development based solely on dollars. Though a massive development would bring fees and taxes to the town, the increased government and supportive infrastructure required would change the town forever. We would be owned by it. And as the applicants that brought the text amendment proposal to us last year told us, development brings more development. The residents of Ashford do not want to see our town turned into a Vernon, Manchester, and Storrs. Thank you for your work dealing with this extremely important, contentious, and difficult issue. Sincerely, Christina Sebo, 91 Perry Hill Road, Ashford, Connecticut. So we have that into the record. The other that, shoot, I did not print up. The other correspondence I received was from Union PZC referral. It has to do with the number of changes to their zoning regulations. It is part of the record that Mike has put out for us, so I'm not going to read through all of those changes and issues. They're highlighted in red in a multi-page document. So please feel free to look at that. A number of different areas they went through and made some more significant, some not so significant changes on. But again, more of a courtesy to us from Union sending that over. Any questions on the correspondence?
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, next item is public hearing. We have no public hearing scheduled for this meeting, so we can move on. And here is where I am asking to have a motion for a change in the agenda to have number 8, new business, the Ashford Housing Authority Rehabilitation Project, moved up on the agenda to be discussed by Jessica from our Housing Authority for the town of Ashford. And so I'm looking for a motion to move that item upward.
I'll make that motion, Jeff.
Jeff Schillinger, thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll
Alex.
second.
Second by Alex. And although any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of moving the agenda item up, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Okay, very good. Jessica, you are on. I think Mike either has your information or we can have you share it however you want to do it best, and you have the
Oh,
stage.
sure. Well, yeah, if Mike can share that, that would be fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. There's the letter and then the scope of work. Is there one that you'd prefer we start with?
I mean, you can go to the scope of work if you want.
Okay.
So in the letter, I was just stating that, so what we're doing right now, we're working with community consulting for Ashford. And we are working on applying for a community development block grant. The application is due on May 31st. And as you can see in the scope of work, so it's a major rehab of the building. And we're looking, the estimated cost is about $1.5 million. This will be our first major rehab of this building. This building is now 30 years old. And it is in need of some upgrades, particularly in the apartments themselves. So, you know, even though, so what I'm asking from the Planning and Zoning Committee is a letter of approval for this project. Now, again, we're not really changing anything. We're not adding units. We're not, you know, typically I wouldn't come to the Planning and Zoning Committee, Commission, but it is required for this grant. Doesn't matter. We have to get your approval, which I think in a way is good. I mean, the more people who know what we're doing, I think is always a good thing. So, so I did just type up this scope of work. This may change a little bit, but this is pretty much the overall, this is our goals for this project. And like I said, most of it is in the units. We're looking at pretty much a gut rehab of the kitchens and the bathrooms in the units. We have 32 units. They're all 1 bedroom. And like I said, nothing's really been done a whole lot for the last 30 years. We've had some upgrades, but for the most part, the units are original for 30 years. We're also looking at the one really big thing is installing walk-in showers. So right now all of the units have bathtubs. And so that's one really big thing that all of the residents would like is a walk-in shower, which makes the most sense given that it is senior housing. Nobody uses the bathtubs in there. So that's one really big item. As you know, a lot of the doors, exterior doors, apartment doors, basically all of the doors in the building are getting redone. And then there is some mechanical systems. The big thing is we're looking at taking out we have a 10,000 gallon oil tank underground. And so we're going to be removing that and then replacing that with a propane tank. Now, I don't think it's going to be an underground tank. I think it'll be above ground. And I'm not quite sure about that yet, but that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get rid of the oil tank and go to propane. We did consider heat pumps, but it's the way our building is designed, those are not really optimal for our building. So we're not gonna do mini splits at this time. The elevator is gonna get a major overhaul. You can just kind of go through it. But anyways, this is what we're looking to do. And again, the funding would come from the Community Development Block Grant. If the application is approved, we're looking at construction probably this time next year or maybe fall of 2025, somewhere around there. So, does anyone have any questions about the project or anything else I can answer any questions?
I have a question. The block grant does not require any matching funds from the town?
No. So, the, community development, but so we are actually, a few months ago, Megan at Community Consulting. So we took some of the program income funds from the block grant that Ashford has and put that towards pre-development costs for this. That is actually required by the Connecticut Department of Housing. Any program income funds that you have need to be used for these types of projects if you're going to do a project like this. So that was approved. Let's see, I think back in February, maybe even January. But the town of Ashford, no money will be coming in. This is all gonna be federal dollars being used.
And I'll just say that
Mhm.
I worked with clients at the housing project, and the bathrooms are definitely not safe at present for them.
Yeah, no, they really need the walk-in showers. Um, yeah, definitely. And I'm not sure why they even did that, especially we have 4 handicap units, and even those have bathtubs. So it'll be a really good thing to get those out of there. So most of the rehab is inside the building. There's really, I mean, we are looking at redoing the siding and stuff like that, but the site plan, nothing is changing on the site plan. Everything will stay the same.
The only possible change I see is some type of pad you would need for the propane tank. Is that potential?
Okay, yep, that's true. That if we do end up doing it, and I don't, it's just too early to really say. We haven't really discussed that a whole lot in detail, but you're right, that could be an addition.
Mhm. So I have
Yep.
I have a couple of nosy questions. Who
Sure.
did your inspection for all of these requirements and changes? Did someone come in from the community consulting to look at what needed to be done, or was it?
So we had a capital needs
in-house?
assessment done. That
Mhm.
was done last October, from a third party. And
Okay.
so we're working off of that. US Housing Consultants completed that capital needs.
Okay. And does the building have central air, or is it individual units, window units?
Yep, so the units have an AC sleeve, but the common areas have central air.
Okay.
Okay, so all the common areas do have air conditioning, and then, like I said, the units have their sleeves, the AC sleeves.
Mhm. And do you have a time limit for using up your funds? I know ARPA had, specific requirements and all when it came to using up the funds from there.
I believe there is a time limit once it's awarded. I'm not sure what the time limit is, but I mean, once we get the money, we're gonna use it right away. Um, but I'm not sure exactly how long of a time frame you have. Usually we end up waiting for the money. So it's
Mhm.
usually the opposite. Once you get it, it gets spent very quickly.
Very good. Those are the few questions I had. Again, more nosy than anything else, not really of
Sure,
a
yeah.
planning and zoning. And it's really a formality, with you looking for planning and zoning approval. It's just funny the way some groups ask for that. I know the town hall, I think, when we did the roof for the fire department, the firehouse, I think they had to go through, have a approval from planning and zoning
Okay.
also for that
Yep.
grant also, or the bonding or the grant. I can't remember which.
Okay. Sure.
Anyways, any other questions? Any other questions from the commission? Hearing none, is there a motion to provide approval to the
I have
housing
a question.
authority?
I have a
Well,
question.
Steve, I can't take your question because this is the commission's work.
It's not the public funds being spent.
It's federal funds being spent, and
But
it's not part of our meeting right now.
But the town, I wasn't gonna be negative. I didn't, my
It's
town is the
it's just by
government.
precedent and protocol, Steve. I mean, go ahead, Doug. What did you want to
No,
share?
I don't think that $1.5 million is out of line, to be honest with you, given that, assuming that you that the town is required to pay prevailing wage, union wages. The only issue I hope for the town is when you dig up the 10,000 gallon tank, it's intact. That's my only comment.
Yeah, the potential cleanup and remediation, always a concern. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll move that we, what do we do? Endorse the project? What words?
Provide approval and endorse the Housing Authority project
That's
for
what
the
I was,
grant.
yes.
That's good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Tom Hastings, thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? Hearing none, seeing no hands. All those in favor of approving the Housing Authority's grant or request for a grant from, I'm sorry, I don't even know what group it is, but all those in favor, please respond by saying aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. And I appreciate the time tonight. I thank you very much for letting me come.
Thank you for providing the report. It helps us all the time to
sure.
know what we're looking at.
Absolutely.
Whoops.
Yeah.
I
And if
see-
anyone has any
I see a hand.
questions. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go.
Hold that thought just a second. Mark, you
I
just letting us
just
know
wanted
you're
to
here?
let you know that I apologize. I called in late.
Okay, all right, Mark. Mark joining us sometime around 7:28. So Mark, we can just seat you because we didn't have a alternate for you. So you are back on and joining us. Okay, so that motion passed. That moves us on to unfinished business. First item is PZC 24-1 subdivision application conversion of agricultural lot to building lot on James Road, map 25-B-6. Owner applicant P. Busalata. Did I do that right? Okay. I think you're nodding yes, so I'll take that.
Yes, you got it correct.
Okay, very good. I will, if there's any material to present or put up there, Mike will be able to do that. If you'd like to, you or I believe Mr. Bushnell wish to discuss your application.
Okay, good evening. I'm Andrew Bushnell, professional engineer, licensed land surveyor with Bushnell Associates, located 563 Woodbridge Street in Manchester. We were hired by Mr. Busolato to work with him on this property to get approval for construction of a single-family home with associated improvements, well, septic system, driveway, for this piece of property. The sort of unique situation here is that this parcel, which is about 36.09 acres, known as Tract A, was established as part of a agricultural subdivision back in about 2000 and I'm just looking at my dates here, lost my place. 2015 it was established. So you can see Mr. Busolato owns Tract A and then Tract B to the west. We're just looking at Tract A. So when he was approved, they were approved as agricultural parcels. They were not approved, not split out as approved building lots. So tonight we're here to have it approved as a buildable lot, so that Mr. Busolato can potentially build this house here as we're showing. What Mike has on the screen right now is an overall view of the property. And as you can see, Mr. Busolato owns the property at 142 James Road to the east. There's some other abutters on James Road to the east. To the south, it's the Boy Scout Council camp. And as I mentioned before, to the south is the other tract that Mr. Busolato owns, and then a couple residential houses across the street on James Road. As part of the process, we had Rick Zulik, certified soil scientist, out to the site to locate the wetlands, just in the area of the proposed development. There still could be more wetlands on the property, but we didn't see it necessary to, you know, locate any beyond, you know, the limit of development. And you can see here, those wetlands are delineated. We field located them, and you can see the 100-foot regulated area that's associated with those. So there is some proposed work within the wetland regulated area. We can see that more clearly on the 20 scale when we get to that. But it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but the Wetlands Commission looked at this and decided that it should be approved by an agent permit with the wetlands agent. And from what I understand, you know, if this does receive planning and zoning approval, the wetlands agent is good with everything. He will sign off on it for the wetlands permit for the proposed work in the upland review area. We have just one more note on the sheet. There's a zoning compliance table that we meet all the zoning requirements: frontage, lot area, front yard setback, side yard setback, rear yard setback, and the buildable area requirement. Those are all met. We can see those more clearly too on the 20 scale if we want to jump to that sheet, which is sheet 1 of the other set. Yeah, there we go. So this is just a blow up of the area where we're proposing the house with the topo that we field shot 2-foot contour topo. And this is where the buildable area comes into play. Has to be less than 20% slope. And we need at least, it was 25,000 square feet. Let me go back to my table. 25,000 square feet, correct?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just, there I can get.
Go ahead, Mr. Bushnell.
Okay, so you can see the buildable area envelope here that's labeled on the plan. So we do have that required buildable area. And again, actually, I said the building lines would be more clear on here. Actually, the building lines don't even show up on this plan because of this the small scale of it. We're well within the building lines requirements. So you can see here, we're proposing to use as an existing gravel driveway access way that was there from James Road. So we're proposing to use that. We just need to grade that to get it to be 10% or less max grade. So the paving's not required. And then the driveway will come up to the house with a garage, 3-bedroom house, 3-bedroom septic system, stone and pipe septic system has been reviewed by the Eastern Highland Health District. We've received approval for them for the septic system design. We have a primary area and also a reserve area in case one's needed in the future. The house, the grading in the back of the house there is to accommodate a walkout basement. We have a well location on here. And as you can see, we have silt fence surrounding the perimeter of the proposed area of disturbance in any downhill gradient direction, which is pretty much the entire area, is a downhill gradient. The driveway kind of rides the top of the hill here. And so the grade is dropping off both sides of the driveway. And the house pretty much is at a top of a knoll, an existing natural knoll. So, being at the top of the knoll, you're down gradient either way from the house. So we do have erosion control. There's a third sheet that has the erosion sediment control plan, the septic details, a driveway cross-section detail, silt fence detail, tracking pad detail, all those standard things that we include in a site plan for a new house. And again, on a 20 scale, you can see more how the disturbance in the upregulated area to the wetlands relates to the proposed placement of the house. Utilities will run from James Road. Not sure if it'll go overhead or underground, crossing the road, but once it gets into the property, it'll go underground. The utility conduits for electric, phone, and cable. That is pretty much summary of what, what we're proposing and what we're intending to build out there. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Okay, any questions from the commissioners?
I have a question. I live on James Road. When was the last time that this area was ever used for agriculture? If ever?
My knowledge, none.
And it may have been logged. It may have been logged, but besides that, I don't know the answer to that.
I live on James Road and I believe that land was never used for agriculture, even though it was zoned for that. It was used by the Boy Scouts, and then in a land swap, it came up for sale and Mr. Busciella bought it.
Yeah, I believe there was something between the Burr Estate and the Boy Scouts, and I don't know the whole story behind it, but I kind of saw bits and pieces researching it. Yeah.
And I can just clarify.
On James Road, we always thought that the Boy Scouts would be an insulation against development. It turns out that that's not true. So we were happy when Mr. Busciella bought it for his own personal use.
Great, thank you for sharing, Nord. Did someone else have a question?
I was just going to clarify.
Oh.
The term agricultural lot or agricultural subdivision really is a term that comes out of the statutes, and it references the creation of a parcel of land not for development or for building purposes. So people create lots for many reasons. It could be for agriculture. It could be they're created out of probate. There's any number of reasons why a parcel of land may be separated from another parcel. You can do that provided it is not a building lot. They are frequently, or as you go back in time, I guess they reference an agricultural subdivision, but it just means that the parcels were created, and at the time they did not require approval from this body because they were not intended for development. So he's coming before you today, not seeking to amend the lot in any way, the size, the frontage. She's not proposing any changes, but because it was originally created without the review of this commission, because at the time it was not created for development, it needs to come before you. So the term is a little bit misleading in the statutes. It just means not a building lot.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. How what's the distance of the proposed gravel driveway from the road to the house approximately?
Let's see, I can tell you in a second.
400 feet.
About 400 feet?
Yeah, that's about what it looks like.
It's a little further.
Yeah, 400, 425. Yeah, I'd say that's a good number. Yeah.
Okay. Luther, maybe you can help me on this. I can't find it for the life of me. Do we have a turnaround requirement for driveways of that length for the fire department?
So it's under Article 4B, Section 7, covers driveways.
Thank you. Yep.
And per those regs, the only standard is width, which these designs meet.
Okay.
Up 500 feet. So once you hit 500 feet, there are requirements for turnouts and turnarounds.
Okay, that's I couldn't remember what the number was, and I was wondering if it was close. So thank you.
We do have a turnout at the end there, but by the garage, so did include,
Okay, well,
like to
you're
include those
under
no
that
matter what.
500 someplace in the middle there, so that works out great. Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Hearing and seeing none. Is there any final statements either Mr. Buscellata or Mr. Bushnell would like to make regarding this?
Just want to thank you for seeing me here tonight, and just let you know it's a small house for my son,
Excellent. Not for you, for your son.
not for me, it's for my son and his future bride.
Oh,
We hope.
excellent. Part of the dowry he's going to be bringing with him?
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
just want to add for the record, so open space is not applicable in this case because the lot is being retained. So if he were getting this developed so that he could sell it to a developer, for example, an open space requirement would be in place. But because this is going to be owned and maintained by a family member, the open space requirement doesn't apply.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. I know we could carry this over. It's not very contentious. Do I have a motion to accept and approve, to approve the application for the subdivision conversion of the agricultural lot?
I would move that. Nord Yakovlev.
Yep, Nord. Is there a second?
I'll second Luther.
Luther? Any further discussion? Mike, I just need to check for my discussion purposes. Have any, all fees been paid? And the one thing that came up that I kind of smiled about is, so the wetlands agent is contingent upon the planning and zoning is contingent upon the wetlands agent approval. Is that where we're at?
It went before the Wetlands Commission. He submitted already. So
Yeah.
they have delegated the review of the permit to the agent, but it already went to the commission itself. So our procedural requirement is met.
Okay. All right. So we don't have to wait for their approval. They've basically seen it and have gone through that process.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the further discussion. All those in favor of approval of the application signify by saying aye.
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 Bye.
All those opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Congratulations, Mr. Bussolata.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Can move forward with what you need to do. And best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item on here is somewhat redundant, but it's some things we continue to need to talk about. And in going through, it looks like there were not necessarily assignments when we look at the first item on the discussion, short-term rentals, but further discussion regarding the short-term rentals and how we need to move forward and what we need to do. I can tell you, I failed in passing this on to Ken to further review our short-term regulations, but I don't think that he has any more input he can give until we wish to make changes to what we have. I mean, he reviewed them before and they were approved, and now, as we stated in the last meeting, everyone's pretty gun shy about these short-term rentals. So what I started to do was just look through my regs for the short-term rentals, and some of the items we brought up the last time were expanding the permitting process or the permit itself, the application. One of the things that came up obviously was the Preston example, Preston, Connecticut, and they have 4 pages for their application. And actually, if I can share my screen.
Hey, Jeff, I did wanted to
Yep.
just give you a quick, I don't know that it's an update, but some information related to
Please.
that. I talked to our assessor to try to get some feedback on her thoughts, because I believe Preston was the town that referenced the income and expense reports, I believe, that come from the assessor's office for the short-term rentals. I think that was the town that had that as part of their requirement. So Lynn actually called down to their assessor's office. They do not administer that process, and they don't and have not requested income and expense reports from operating short-term rentals in that town as of yet. So my hope was that we could reach out and sort of get a proof of concept, because it was an interesting idea, and we're capturing that information because income obviously is related to rentals, and there's sort of a way that you could verify that. But not sure what's going on there, but their assessor's office is not involved in that, even though the regs seem to imply they are.
I see. Yeah, because that would also lead to one of the things that Mark brought up, I believe, regarding a 2% tax that could be levied that the town could collect on that income also.
So I think that the impression I got was that they don't request the income and expense reports. I guess if it may be that P&Z is requiring that they be filed. And so through that process, they're saying you need to file this, but the assessor's office isn't actually requesting them or following up and saying you need to provide it. And there's some challenges there with how do you value something that's in a residential home. You know, if it's a business, it has a certain value, but if it's a certain number of days or certain times of the year, it's used for commercial purposes. So it's a little bit tricky.
For residential, yeah.
Yeah. So Lynn, I think, was going to try to look into it a little bit more, but again, I was hoping we'd get some proof of concept, but not as of yet.
Well, I'm trying to figure out, what does that gain us? Does that gain us actual, what the actual use is, as opposed to someone just telling us how many times they rented it? Or what's the gain on that?
I think that it just provides an additional layer of consistency in that they are reporting to the assessor's office an income and expense information. And if they are then reporting the number of rentals that they've done in any particular year to us, and then you have the online calendar, I think it's just another way to sort of make sure that the information is consistent. It's not definitive in that it's still going to require, if somebody is alleging an error or there's not been truthful, still going to go and have to figure things out online. But I think it was just another, maybe perhaps a layer of legitimacy, since the I&E forms are a process that's already been established by the assessor, and those I&E forms are going to generate a personal property declaration and tax bill associated with that, just as if you're a hairdresser or a landscaper or an accountant. I'm not it's definitely not a perfect science, that's for sure.
And what comes to mind for me, and again, I'm dabbling in an area where I have no experience in, but when it comes to, is the same requirement of, for lack of a better term, long-term renters, someone over 30 days in most cases? Do they have that same requirement?
No, because I think over the 30 days, they're treated more like a tenant, and they effectively establish a residency. And so if someone's been there for that extended period of time, it would be like an eviction, essentially.
I see. Okay. Like I said, now we're going into areas that I don't want to go anywhere near. Again, I'm going to try and share this again right now. See if it comes up here. There we go. Let me get you folks small. So here is the short-term rental application at the town of Preston. The items that are required, the fee, obviously, site and plot plan, an appropriate scale, any elevation and floor plans of any proposed structure, letter from Department of Transportation for work within a state highway right of way, copy of property deed on file in the clerk's office, and copies of approval letters from applicable agencies, their inland wetlands or ZBA as applicable. Again, we don't go word for word on this, but as you can see, description of the project, including site improvements, drainage improvements, building and uses, square footage of the structure, number of bedrooms, on-site trash and recycling, have the septic and well been approved by the health district, number 4, number 5, 24-hour contact information, parking spaces, notarized letter compliance with all STR regulations, and that form is attached, annual renewal permit, and knowing that there is an annual renewal permit and you recognize that, accessed by the ZEO and agent thereof, such as a state resident trooper or the town planner, which I thought was interesting, to inspect the property at any time, 24-hour notice. If there's a concern of the rental at the request of the ZEO, you would need to agree to cease rental of the property until the matter is resolved to the ZEO satisfaction. Application signatures and permission to access, and the different groups identified here, and the agreement for the short-term rental and the applicant owner. The length of time at the property to 3 weeks in a 3-month period. In this case, neat and orderly manner. Contact manager will be provided. A contact manager will be provided to the ZEO. Non-compliance issues addressed in compliance. No outdoor events, noise levels, no on-street parking, the annual renewal, and access, as it's mentioned. And a guest register shall be maintained. That's something that Janet brought up the last time. So it's pretty, though I don't have a copy of ours right here, Mike, I think it's ours, it's pretty extensive compared to ours.
Yeah, agreed.
And does it generate any thoughts or discussion of the commission for something like that?
So Jeff, this is Luther. Just briefly.
I remember you.
Yeah. So I guess, and apologies because I am coming late and I read the minutes, but they don't tell the whole story. Missing last month. A couple of things come to mind for me. One is just being really clear about what the intent of any regulations and permit requirements are as this moves forward, and having a really clear understanding for the commission about what is the intention of the requirements and how are they supporting our mandate, our what we're supposed to be doing for the town. And then secondly, I still see we could regulate and require application and documentation galore and have no effective means of enforcement. So the enforcement side of this continues to be something that I'm curious about as to the reliance of neighbors to complain or neighbors to enforce, the whole problem of that. I mean, if that's really the model that works the best, are we better off just letting this revert back to the lake associations and make it their problem? And it's not a zoning problem, it's just a lake association problem. Because I don't want to pit neighbors against neighbors through regulations, I guess is what I'm getting at. And then, I feel like this is something that would create more contention is my concern. That I think that as we continue to levy more regulations against people where neighbors can file complaint instead of talking to each other, then there's just more opportunity for conflict. I'd like to see what we can do, and maybe nothing can be done. Maybe conflict is just going to happen, but I don't like driving people towards conflict.
Well, I appreciate that, Luther. And I know you weren't at the last meeting, and it might have been something that wasn't captured in there. My gut feeling is that if we don't have enforcement on the back end, then can we make compliance more important on the front end? If they are willing to jump through all the hoops that we would require on the front end, I would think, again, maybe this me being naive, I would like to think that by being compliant on the front end, that they would maintain compliance going through that in order to get their renewal, in order to be a good neighbor and a good citizen, the person doing the rental of the property, or using the property as a rental, I should say, a short-term rental, and would not require a lot more enforcement on the backside.
I mean, anything's possible, I suppose. I just, I worry about people are bothered and or disturbed by various things, and a well-intentioned gathering of people sometimes can be perceived as someone's out of bounds, and it drives complaints, and oh, that's a rental and they're the problem. And I just, I don't know, maybe that's fine. Maybe I'm the naive one, that we can find a way to work through this without, so many regulations.
And I played devil's advocate last time too, Luther, with, is it, as you said, is it an issue for the town? Is it the town? Is it planning and zoning's concern? Or should it be, as I think I mentioned, 80%, 90% of the issues we seem to be having are in the lake communities. So is it really the lake association's issues to work with and deal with? I know Janet had brought up something about the covenants for their deeds, where it would be a laborious process for them to do it. But again, should it be in their wheelhouse to deal with it as opposed to ours and regulate this?
Well, can I just say, and since Luther wasn't here, I pointed out last time, a friend of mine who lives in the middle of Hampton, the middle of nowhere, opened a Airbnb, and she allows dogs. She has special things for dogs. And I thought, nobody's going to stay there, because why would you go out of your way to stay in this place? And she has a lot of guests, because they come because it's a place where they can stay and have their dogs. So I think anybody could decide to do an Airbnb in Ashford, whether it's catering to dog lovers or fishermen or hunters, or it isn't necessarily in the Lake District in the future. So I just think it's a good thing to get on top of it, because when you buy a house in a residential district, I think we still expect that we're going to have neighbors who live here and are neighborly, and we're not going to have transient people coming in and out. So I just think it's a good thing looking toward the future to figure out how to regulate it. And I agree with you. You don't want too many regulations, but as Jeff said, we discussed that if we ask these people all these questions and they're answering them, and it also makes us look more serious, that perhaps they'd be more willing to abide by the rules.
Thank you, Janet. Any other input from any of the commissioners?
The only other thing I'll say, and maybe this is pointless, possibly, the applicants may have all the greatest intentions of compliance in the world, but they're not the ones staying there. And so, if they're one troublesome guest away from losing their permit, after going through all this due diligence and work and fee structure for applying, and they're doing the best they can, and somebody shows up and they've been given the rules and it's posted and it's in triplicate, and the people just don't care and they just get rowdy and get complaints. We're then punishing the person that is really trying to comply and is really trying to be a good steward of the neighborhood and all these things. So it just sounds like we're just trying to discourage people from doing this.
Well,
And-
like any of these, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to, you probably have, rent an Airbnb or Vrbo or whatever. Actually, you know, your responsible super hosts and things like this, there's a pretty solid vetting process. You know, you usually don't just rent it to anyone in order to get the money. You know, you provide ID, they potentially might take your license and run a background check or something on you. I know I've had to provide copies of my photo ID for doing a rental and things like this. So there is a responsibility of the owner. And I would do this too. If I had a place nice enough to rent on a lake or whatever, I'd make sure the people I was renting to were upstanding, not just able to flash the money at me. You know, I don't want them coming and ruining it, nor in my case, being a responsible neighbor, I wouldn't want them inflicting anything on my neighbors, even if it was a rental, maybe not my primary residence, but it was a rental. Again, you know, I know the other thing that I think even Janet and Mark might discuss is the buying up by companies, LLCs, as opposed to a responsible residential landowner. You know, it's this LLC, this company that just rents them, and it's just going for the bucks and renting it out there. Well, if it's them and they can't keep it under control, then, you know, they should not be able to gain that renewal of their rental. I think Preston gives 3 strikes is what it is. And after, Janet, was it after a year you lose a strike or something like that?
Well, no, each incident you lose a strike. Each
Each
incident,
incident you lose a strike, but if you go a year without, you take a strike off or something like that, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I can't remember the details.
Something like that, because there was something way of get out of jail, so to speak, a get out of jail card. So, you know, again, I think it's contingent. I don't think we're punishing the people that are trying to, as you said, follow the rules and do what's right. You know, there is a responsibility on an individual. And if it's not an individual, if it's just an uncaring LLC out for the money and giving it off to any frat boy that shows up and wants to rent something like that and have a party and make an issue for the neighborhood, then, you know, lo and behold, you're going to have that permit. You're not going to have that permit available to you, and that rental property is not going to be any good to you.
Right.
Can I jump in quick?
Sure, Mike.
So the things that, for a lot of the things that we're talking about here fall into sort of 2 categories: things that are much easier to measure, and things, and I think therefore enforce, and things that aren't. Trash, noise, illegal parking, those types of things are a little bit easier to manage because they're external. It's easy to tell if people are throwing trash all over the place. It's easy to tell if they're parking up and down the road, creating traffic issues. Noise is an external thing. It can be observed, it can be recorded, whatever. Those are a little bit easier to manage, and are not necessarily that far afield from some of the things you might consider a traditional special permit for. The one thing that's really hard to manage, it's really hard to enforce, really hard to basically monitor, and generates the biggest amount of, I guess I'll say, feedback, is the duration. The one thing that Ashford has that really is uncommon is that we limit the number of stays during any calendar year to something that is extremely low. And so we then put ourselves in a position where you have someone that has spent all the same money as anybody else to acquire the Airbnb, manage the Airbnb, outfit the Airbnb, insure the Airbnb, but they only get 6 rentals. And that's, I think, where a lot of the feedback, at least I've gotten from neighbors, have been, well, they're not in compliance with the number of rentals. I don't get calls about trash and wild parties and parking all over the place. It really has come down to, I know they're limited to 6 and they've exceeded 6. And that is the hardest thing for us to manage. But that was something that is established by the commission. I think that's where we've seen some of the complaints or violations or alleged violations at this point, because we've gotten correspondence from people who've said, here's their calendar online, and it's clearly beyond the number of rentals they've been allowed. It's not related at all to trash or anything else. So it doesn't get to Janet's point about having a transient nature in the neighborhood because people are coming and going. And I think you could still look at that the number of rentals per year. But I think if you're gonna look to try and maintain compliance, if you're gonna try to be stronger up front with some of those things, I think that the trade-off might be that you allow these folks to actually get a better use out of the property. And I think there's more in it for them because there's more legitimate operation happening. My 2 cents, if it's worth that.
Interesting. Where is the dating in ours? 3 times during a 6-month period. Okay, short-term rental unhosted. Okay.
And the other piece that I've gotten questions on that is it says, the number of times. So you can have 6 rentals of 2 days each, which, whatever. So that 12 days over a year, or you can have 6 rentals of 3 weeks each. And it still qualifies, right? We're not limiting the days, we're limiting the rentals. Our rentals are limited to, I think it's 21 or whatever it is, but the idea that the duration of the rental doesn't impact how many rentals someone gets.
And in your experience and what you've seen, it's that makes us different is that it's the number of rentals as opposed to the number of days.
I don't believe I've reviewed our set of regulations that limits the total, that limits frequency.
Mm-hmm.
I understand why. I understand, the interest in doing so. I just haven't seen another set of regulations that does it. And that I don't in my free time review short-term rental regulations. So it's possible it's out there, and I'd be happy to look. I mean, this is a national issue right now, but it's a challenge because even using a calendar online, Airbnb, VRBO, simply showing blackout dates on a calendar doesn't mean there's a rentals. It could mean that the owner lives there. It could mean the owner's brother is there. Right. And so as the person who's sort of going to be the middle ground between the renters, the rentee, the owners, the neighbors, and the commission, it's I at least would like to have them be more concrete so that the expectation and the operating standards are more easily defined, no matter which side of this sort of issue you fall on.
So 3 weeks, 3 times 9 weeks. So that would be, so the way we have it now, if the, was it 3 weeks is the upper limit? Is that what we were saying?
28 days is, over 28 days is no longer short-term rental.
Okay, so up to 28 days. So actually it's 12 weeks in a 6-month period. 3, 3, and 3. or excuse me, 4, 4, and 4. Is that correct? Is my math right?
Right.
Yes.
That's the maximum you could
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
In reality, of course, most people don't rent for 28 days. I guess, you know, the thing is how to balance the owner's ability to rent, but still discourage these corporations from buying up all our housing to make money.
Are we allowed to have that bias though?
Why not?
Well, because we're supposed to regulate the use, not the user, right?
Well, right
Right.
now they're looking at federally regulating how many homes these corporations can buy. So, I mean, this is a national discussion on corporate ownership of residential homes, not just short-term rentals. So,
You
yeah,
know,
I think we have the right to regulate.
I get a postcard once a month from somebody who wants to pay cash for my house.
Me too.
So, you know, they're out there looking to gobble up everything they can. And I just think, you know, how do we protect our neighborhoods? How do we protect our residential neighborhoods and keep them residential? And keep housing for families, not for corporations.
Hmm. The long pauses, which I'm not comfortable with, but it's, you know, it's an interesting thing because then you get into the fact, okay, that good neighbor has just basically sold to their house to an LLC and taken off. And you know, I know they're not in the neighborhood anymore, but I guess they weren't that good a neighbor if they sold it off without that intent of maintaining, you know, but they're leaving, so what do they care? It's interesting. And I know, Mark, the last time you had talked about on that national scene that some places actually in certain zones only allow for certain number of rentals in a zone.
Well, they have certain zones where you can have short-term rentals and certain zones where you cannot.
Right, right, right.
Right. And in fact, I mean, a lot of towns are completely, eliminating short-term rentals where they're not allowed at all in certain towns.
Well, we heard that, and if I'm redundant, I'm sorry, but we
Correct.
heard that at the meeting where someone said, yeah, we're just going to, I know, I spoke with somebody and they had put in short-term rental regs and then they rescinded them and they just said, no short-term rentals. You know, any rental has to be over 30 days. Well, then you get into, you know, they're not regulating it, but yeah, the person signs up for a short-term rental. Their intent is to only be there for 2 weeks and the owner doesn't go after them for the 2 weeks. It was kind of a under the table agreement. They were just going to rent for 2 weeks anyways, but the contract says 30 days. So there are loopholes everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, somebody could sign a 1-year lease with no penalty to vacate after 2 days and sidestep all of these regulations, and all of this is moot.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes back to my whole question earlier of enforcement. And also, I guess the other question I have, and I'm very naive to this because it's foreign to me, is what kind of actual pressure is Ashford seeing on the short-term rental front? I'm actually very curious about this. Is this a thing where there's a tremendous amount of short-term rental bookings in this town?
More than you know.
That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah.
What's that
Um,
number look like?
I'd be curious about that number too, Jeff. How big of an issue is this
But
outside
we
of?
the town, Jeff, we only know if they apply for an application and seek a permit. And we've only had a few of those actually do that compared to if you go online and look at some of these sites. Mike, I think we had one person who was complaining, who was trying to be compliant. They had like 8 examples in Ashford or something like that.
Yeah, I think we're probably, I don't, in the realm of 10 or so operating at this point in time. We have maybe 1 or 2 bed and breakfasts, which are separate. I don't know what the volume is as far as how many days or how many bookings. And there
Right,
have
but
been,
just actual rentals that are out there and available to be selected.
So I mean, again, maybe I'm naive. 10 doesn't seem like an awful lot. That's interesting. Yeah, this is something I have a friend that does some short-term bookings, and there are data packs you can buy that give you the booking percentages of the towns and the
Yeah.
surrounding areas, how often they're booking, and how much they are charging, and all of those things. I'm wondering if that's something that the town would be wise to obtain.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Hastings.
Have we had any feedback whatsoever from either lake association? Do they care? I mean, I haven't heard.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, we haven't really, nobody's been involved with, I mean, it could be their issue, but I haven't heard anything, any complaints from that side of it saying.
Well, honestly, my take on it is that the lake associations, and again, this is one man's opinion, it's not the commission's opinion, was that the early on when we started formulating these, and we had presidents of both lake associations attending our meetings, and we were trying to define a number of items. They were very involved with that. And we've actually gotten some feedback about that. Due to short-term rentals, many of their legal fees and their budgets have been exceeded because of what a short-term rental brings to what's the word I'm looking for, to be insured, what possibly could happen. And so their insurance fees go up for the association itself. If I've got that right, Janet, was that something that took place?
Yes, the Ashford Lakes insurance went up, I think, almost 20% when the insurer realized how many rentals there were on the lake. The Ashford Lake Association has put out recommendations for short-term rentals. They're in the sort of the same position we are. They can't really enforce that because it would have to go in our covenant and be voted by everyone, go in our covenant, and then everyone's deed has to be rewritten. So that, gets very, very expensive. So right now they just have recommendations that they're trying to get people to follow.
So honestly, the Lake Association would like us to continue to try to regulate these and be their long arm of the law, if you will, in this case, and somehow. But again, as Janet said, we have a number of the same issues when it comes to enforcement, and I think you mentioned at the last meeting. Enforcement is something we just don't have. And I think Dick Williams brought up, possibly hiring more staff to do this. I can't see for identifying 10 rentals right now, even if it went to 20 rentals, that being a full-time job of somebody following up on rental properties, short-term rental properties in Ashford. Um, so, uh,
So I've asked the question a couple of times, and I think I don't know that I fully understand what keeps us from being able to do this if it's a housing authority issue. And I think Mike's reasonably familiar with the way that Mansfield permits rental properties. Not necessarily just short-term, but rental properties in general, and inspects them and has testing compliance that has to be done. And the fees of those, permits fund that person, that inspector, it's through the building. And I mean, if there are complaints or problems called in, they're re-inspected. And if they're found, if these people are found to be out of compliance, I mean, it's a significant fee per day. It's per day, it's something over $100, I believe, per day of not being in compliance. And I'm just wondering, if we want to be in this business of regulating, we have to be in the business of enforcement. And how do we get to a point where we have tools like that at our disposal? I personally, and again, as Jeff mentioned, it being one man's opinion, my own one man's opinion is I'm very pro people being able to do with their property as they see fit. I also am sensitive to the impact of the surrounding communities. I'm not blind to that impact. I think there's balance to be had there. And I think that, threading that line between encouraging respectful use of a home and then not also creating bias against someone benefiting from their investments, that should be a goal.
by that,
Mhm.
like most of our decisions, Luther, it's a fine line between trying to meet all the needs from various factions and still have a workable, enforceable, and regulated environment.
Well, it might be worthwhile to think about changing the wording to number of days that can be rented as opposed to just 3 times. And I don't know. I don't have an answer for the the complaints. I think if we do ask people to have a guest book, we could look at it. Of course, that can always be falsified, but
And you couldn't necessarily do that. That would be for renewal because when you go for your first permit, you don't have a guest book. You don't have anyone that's signed up yet.
right.
So that would be for renewal purposes. Something I was just thinking about and looking at.
And we had also discussed that a letter could go out to people if there was a complaint, just to let them know that we're on there, that we haven't forgotten about them.
You mean to the owners, so to speak?
Oh, to the owners, right.
Yeah.
Reminding them of what they agreed to.
Well, that's what I liked about the prospect one, where someone puts they've got to sign up for this. They've got to put their initials down. They've got to put their name down to what they've agreed to, as opposed to here's my fee, here's my permit. Thank you very much. Oh, I didn't
Right.
know that. I didn't know I couldn't do that. I didn't know that wasn't allowed. I didn't agree to that. I mean, up front, they're agreeing to this, and hopefully their word means something when they sign the paper and they initial the requirements.
Right.
So, what I'd like to do so we can move on with this is and again, we don't need a motion or anything on this. I'd like to take a crack maybe working with Mike, who'll keep me on the straight and narrow of rewriting some of the, expanding upon some of the, current language we have, which would include, the application process, as well as requirements for renewal and things like this. And then, as opposed to working in the nebula here, have the commission take a look at it, next time around. Can I get some nodding heads on that? I
Sounds
see a
good.
couple already.
Sounds like a good,
Yeah.
good idea.
I can support that
Okay.
process.
Okay, very good. So I'll work on that, and Mike will put me down on his very long list of priorities and items to deal with, and we'll talk about that and come back with something with the commission for next time to take a look at as a draft.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you for the discussion. The interstate interchange zone. Further discussion on that. Luther, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Did you, when we talked at one of the town meetings, did you say you had some stuff? You're sorry you missed a meeting. You had some things you wanted to share?
Well, okay, so at the risk of exposing myself to be an idiot, yeah, sure. So
You're way too humble tonight, Luther. I don't know if I can take it.
I don't think it's a secret that I've been a little bit suspect about, not suspect, I've been a little bit hesitant, I should say, about making significant changes to the IID zone with a looming POCD comprehensive town-wide process that we're required to undertake. And I'm still hesitant to do that. And so, again, one person's opinion is that I would personally recommend leaving the current regulations untouched, unchanged, until we get some additional knowledge and input from the POCD process, and then look at things. And as part of the POCD process, I think so. Okay, so we ask our expert boards and commissions that provide service to the town to give us feedback about the things they're best at. And so, in the last POCD, this parcel was identified as a significantly good place to develop some use that would drive revenue for the town. That's why the zone was created, was to drive development. So to that end, the EDC has funding available and is already tasked, I'm sure, with some amount of POCD review. We also have another zone in town that hasn't been developed and was targeted for development. It's over, now the town owns it. It's over on 44. So I would like to see the EDC fund and work with an independent, not in town, not any skin in the game, independent consultant to provide recommendations about the best use alignment for IID and technology zones as part of their POCD homework and recommendations. And what that would give us then is it would give us some information upon which to have a conversation of this is a list of uses that an independent expert in uses in development has identified as being something that would fit with the siting and conditions of these zones. And then it could be at the discretion of the commission to discuss that list and determine if any, all, or none of those things fit with the larger POCD process. And then once that entire comprehensive dialogue and input is completed, then we'd have a POCD to reference in the creation or altering or elimination of these various use potentials. And I just feel like it would be a more comprehensive, more informed, more balanced process than what we've done to date. So, yeah, that was my 2
So in
cents.
the world of in the world of the chicken and the egg, you see the POCD coming first, and then the IID developed off of that.
I mean, from what I understand of how we are supposed to draft regulations, is we are supposed to draft regulations in support or in alignment with our POCD, that they are not supposed to be reverse engineered or done not in concert with each other. That, I mean, when we look at language change requests, we are tasked to evaluate them based off of their alignment with the POCD. So in my mind, if we were 7 years out from a POCD revision, I think it would be a different concern for me. But I just feel like on the cusp of one, it makes too much sense to not do it as an inclusive, comprehensive review and adjustment when we have the opportunity to do it that way.
Yeah, and again, I use that chicken and the egg analogy simply because, as you said, they're right on top of each other. I mean, as opposed to 10 years ago, even then, the IID zone was developed prior to the POCD. IID zone went in effect on 2014, and 2015, the POCD was developed. And I think the POCD was developed in, as you said, retrofitted to the IID zone that was already developed in the regs.
Yeah, and,
So
and
I'm not saying that was a good way or a bad way. I'm just saying that's what was faced 10 years ago.
yep, and my recollection is that because it was actually part of it was created as part of a comprehensive, long comprehensive revision of all the regs. It wasn't singled out as a let's create
Right.
this. It was the collective rewriting of the regs that provided both the IID zone and the technology development zone were both products of the complete revision of the regs that had been going on for years and years and was completed just before the POCD revision was completed. And then captured in the POCD. Again, if the POCD this time around, if the collective knowledge of the town says as part of the POCD that we just simply need to have residential and commercial zones, then we're going to have work on our hands. But yeah, I think it should be a more collective process than a reactive process. We have the luxury
Well,
right on top of a POCD revision.
Well, I can tell you, even with whatever you want to call it, Cato Rock, Wagon Shed, Technology Zone, that area on 44, in the 10 years that it's taken to go through remediation and acquisition and all of those things, right now it is in the selectman's office as to what is the best use of that area. And there have been a number of proposals presented out there. So being an IT, we might be throwing a technology zone right out the window because it's not, from the POCD.
Right, and I would hope that that work is being done and I'm sure it is being done in concert with experts in understanding what can and should be done with that parcel. I'm not a development expert. I do my very best to understand what comes before us and I understand all the plans and all of those things, but I've never, I've never been a land developer, so we
Right,
have
right. Yeah, I understand.
these
I
expert,
understand fully.
we have these expert committees and boards in the town. I'm a big fan of leveraging smart people. And so,
We also are working with consultants too, because we had originally early on with that Cattle Rock property, we had a group come in and good or bad, the meeting in discussing what needed to be taken place to do the remediation of it, the meeting transpired, moved into uses before, we even had it cleaned up and owned it. What could we do with it? It was a little premature for that discussion to start to take place. But, that consulting group also knew what they had done in other places and development that had taken places in areas they had cleaned up like that. So,
yeah, and
yeah, we
Jeff,
would work with consultants.
that's exactly the kind of dialogue that I'm encouraging in my speaking tonight is let's engage with intelligent, informed, experienced people and get that list of alignment and then go from there. Because for us to, I mean, I can only speak for myself. For myself to just say these uses yes, these uses no, what's the basis? What's my basis of expertise? How am I a subject matter expert to be able to make those recommendations with any meaningful credentials? But if we brought in real experts that can give us pros, cons, impacts, expectations. If you approve a use such as this, you can expect to see impact such as this. If we can have those informed conversations with an expert, with a consultant, with a group, I don't see how that does anyone a disservice. I think that would do a great service.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Mike, you, I don't know if you're ready for this, not to put you on the spot. Do you have that, list of, approved uses for the IID right now to share?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mike had said at the last meeting, he was going to put together a bullet list or whatever, a shortened list of what the, currently, allowed uses are in there to kind of form our minds around and get our heads around what currently is acceptable in there compared to what's been being bandied about.
These are the current allowable uses as written in the regs.
And of course, manufacturing is nowadays is a wide, well, let me put it this way. It's a very obtuse statement of what can be manufacturing, both large and small manufacturing in there. Agriculture, obviously, specific sales of building equipment, merchandise, offices, skill trades or professional services, motor vehicle, hotel, motel, restaurants, retail, wireless, communication sites. So that's a piece that Mike will email out to the member just so they have that. And again, that's everything that's listed basically in the regs also. Any questions on this from anyone? Or Mike, did you have any other discussion on that?
The only thing that I would say is that the things that we've contemplated regarding the IID kind of can be broken out into two points to consider. One is, what do we want there, which is what we're looking at here. These are the allowed uses, and it really runs the gamut because you can have agriculture, manufacturing, gasoline service, retail. I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag in that it doesn't really create a zone that's laser focused because it's kind of all over the place in the impact, water usage, number of employees required, impact to parking. So there's the set of what do we want? And then there's this other piece to it, which is what do we want it to look like? You're not going to have a 200,000 square foot Dollar General. And so, but you could have 200,000 square foot manufacturing or 200,000 square foot maybe business office, although maybe that's probably 25 years too late. So there's two different things that we can discuss or consider. One is, do we know or have thoughts about making changes to what can happen there, and or do we have changes about or thoughts about how it can be designed? So maybe we're good with these uses, but we want to make changes to the regs as previously requested because we recognize, for example, something that I think the commission should still think about because I think it was a reasonable request. The building heights in this zone are completely in conflict with the market. There's very little that you're going to build there at that current allowable height. So that would be something you could consider. The sizes of the buildings, for example, is another. Do you want to have multiple principal uses, or does the site have to be all manufacturing or all retail or all restaurant? So the what and then the design of the what are kind of two separate pieces. And you can, to Luther's point, you could deal with both of those following the POCD. You could deal with one of them now, one of them later. But there's kind of two components to that text amendment and even the previous text amendment from like early on 2020. And it's two separate things to consider, I guess.
Along this line, I'd also like to share something. And it has to do with the 140 narrative responses we got on the survey. So I started playing around with them and just kind of tabulated. I tried to pigeonhole them into I guess as wide a net as I could and what I captured. So again, out of the 143 responses, many of them, 55 responses or 38.5% were general keep Ashford rural responses. Not pretty self-explanatory, not a surprise there. 9.8% or 14 responses were apply buildable lot standards. We have standards to our other locations, our other zones, so have apply buildable lot standards to that zone. Again, similar to the other zones. Allow town focused services, smaller services, smaller businesses, restaurants, hotel, retail, things that were services that the town could access and benefit from. So that was about 8.4%. Also the same level, 12 responses and 8.4% were allow for any type of development in there. This is the we need the taxes, we need to change our tax base group. So it was basically many of the responses in there came to develop or perish as opposed to publish or perish. We need to develop or we're not going to be around here in another generation. People won't be able to afford Ashford and the land there will be sold off anyways. Interesting was 10 responses or about 7%, either no comment, they took the time to put in no comment, or it was non-applicable. It really didn't effort what we were talking about. Like I just have examples in here of the comments. One on Dollar General, how Dollar General looks. Another statement was on transparency of what's going on and how the vote should go and things like that. And then, there were some folks that were not familiar with the statutes we are under. 10 responses, another 7%. It needs to go to a referendum. It needs to have a town vote for anything that goes into there. And that's kind of what you and I are not paid to do. We're elected officials, and we are given the responsibility of this decision when it comes to what is best for the town of Ashford and its people. Another group, about 5.6%, specifically stated maximum square footage of 50 to 125,000. Most were even saying the under 250K was too large. They felt they needed another response. Then there was the folks who I don't think understood that we don't own it, or that we should buy it from the owner. There were statements maybe we could get UConn and Yale or the state to come in and do something with it, and it's not our decision to make along those lines. And then there were those who said we should just buy it from the owner, and most of those said maintain it as recreational in some way without causing a huge effect on the land and the habitat itself. Then there were those who just simply complained about the survey in their comments, that it was biased, that it had no choice of none of the above, NOTA choice. And last were just miscellaneous, and they really couldn't fit into a category. About 5 or 3%. Do you know what would happen to the EMS needs if something large went in there? I would miss the dark skies. I feel strongly both ways, were kind of the statements in those. So though, the percentage of, and again, not to belittle it in any way, it's not surprising based on the response we saw from our hearings and the written submissions for the hearings. 38% were keeping Ashford rural. I thought it was interesting that there was a consensus about the buildable lot standards to change, and probably that has to do with what Mike said: the height, the square footage, the allowable square footage that's in there, the height, those types of issues. And of course, it's interesting that people want town-focused services, but they have to realize what economic development has been facing is that someone to move in there and offering services just to what I've calculated to be about 25,000 people. And, I tried to not expand it too far, but that would be, Ashford, part of Willington, part of Tallinn, part of Stafford, Eastford, and Union on that side. There aren't many businesses that are going to survive on a population base of about 25,000 people, especially at the size that they're talking about. A Whole Foods and Aldi's. I'm trying to think of some of the other examples. And many didn't want fast food to go in there. They wanted some type of restaurant. Well, restaurants these days are having a tough time as it is keeping their doors open. And I think we are outside of the new Dollar General plan of their business plan. I think we have enough of those in the area to cover that. But again, this is nothing official. It's unofficial. This is something I just put together in going through the 143 responses and trying to whittle it down to, what was shown from the survey. How we would use this, again, it's for consideration. It's something to look at. I encourage you to go in and look at the responses, especially some of the longer ones. There's some good feedback in there to be captured. So that was just something I wanted to offer up to give more information to the commission. Yes, Janet. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I appreciate what Luther's saying about the POCD. And it is true, but also we do have the survey, which gives us an idea of what people think. And I feel that we know a lot more about the site now than we did 10 years ago or even 3 years ago. And that rather than looking at what types of things we want to go in there, we should first look at the site and what is safe to put in there, considering the water quality and the slopes and everything that's involved in the site. We did ask Mike to run, you talk about experts that, Yukon Clear has made that program where you can input your site specifics and come up with what kind of parameters you should have for building. They did run it. We asked.
Is that I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did. Is that the same program itself, or is that just a single tool that Charles Vidic ran as an example in one of his presentations?
Charles Vidic ran it as an example and wrote it up, and then Luther suggested that we have it run excluding the bedrock issue.
Oh, okay, all right.
We had asked Mike to do that. I thought he was going to have it for this meeting. I think, all of Ashford is a watershed, and we have the highest quality of water that the state rates. And I think that we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about how to develop this site. And I think it's not incompatible to protect the resources and come up with suitable parameters for development. But I think that we need to look at both of those issues, not just focus on what we want there and what might go in there. How to keep that area safe. And if we don't adjust the regulations now and wait for the POCD, I think that we definitely should pass the low impact checklist that Jean Pillow had suggested for the area. And maybe Mike could get that on our materials for the next meeting.
So I just want to note, I looked at that parcel prioritization source water tool.
Mhm.
I cannot see how it can be manipulated to generate a result different from what was presented. And that is could be entirely because I have not figured out how to use it. But I looked at that GIS system, I looked at all the information that they have, and I could not generate something that was different than what was prepared. I could be using it wrong, and I'd love for somebody else to school me on it or to run it and say, yep, Mike, you've got to go back to school for it. But it allows you to identify parcels. So you create or select the polygon, in this case would be the town of Ashford, and then you plug in information and it helps you identify values on the site, but it doesn't, and from what I could tell, allow you to manipulate parameters on a site by site basis. But again, that could be me, so I'd be more than happy for someone to show me what I'm doing wrong.
Do you know if Yukon Clear offers any services to towns or
I am very, very close with the director of Clear, and I could ask her, but my understanding is no, but I could certainly reach out and see if there's anything that they offer or if there's any way that they can plug in on some of this stuff.
Okay.
And
Yes, Susan.
just briefly, something that Janet brought up, I think very appropriately, sparked a thought about the preservation of resources. And one of the things that I thought was a challenge, I'm sure the most recent text amendment applicant really found this as a challenge. It was difficult for me to observe because I wasn't really allowed to participate in that process in the way that I maybe would have liked to. There's a perception problem that I've observed in some of these proceedings with the public hearings where a plan will be presented that has excellent measures, excellent engineering, all the steps, everything is checked off and over engineered, and everything's going to be great. And no one believes it because they can't imagine that something could be done and also not have a negative impact. And so I think anything we look at regulatory wise, we would be wise to see with the understanding that that may be the reaction from the public, is that just because it can be engineered and just because there is a way to do it, if it's not an easily understood mechanism, or if it's outside of someone's scope of comfort, they may or may not believe it, even though it's true. And that may be something that we continue to be faced with as we make revision and or get applications. So that just kind of popped into my brain. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is that, yes, we want to be very cautious about exposure for environmental concern up there, but we already have a pretty significant environmental exposure that we have no control over in the form of Route 84 running right through there. And I mean, a month and a half ago, there were 2 tractor trailers floating in the pond that probably had more environmental impact in that 12-hour period than anything that we're going to approve for development up there is going to have.
That's true. Jeff, you're
Jeff, you're muted.
If I can unmute, yeah, they just yelled at me. Thank you. I was just saying that it'll be interesting because again, by the end of this month, we should be seeing the POCD information from the different boards that we requested to gain some of that. So maybe if we can see what's in there, especially the EDC, what they've commented on and their sections, we'll bring that forth. I guess from what Luther had mentioned, my one concern, and I was surprised actually, Luther, that you said this about having the EDC fund and work with an independent consultant on something like that, because there's definitely a divide. There's a divide between whatever groups, Keep Ashford Rural, No Mega Warehouse, whatever group it is, and the EDC and people supporting the EDC. And I can easily see, and again, this is just me being blunt, I can easily see the Keep Ashford Rural group seeing that coming from a biased source.
Yeah, no, that's fair play, Jeff. And to be abundantly clear in why I named them, I mean, one, that's what they're tasked with. If they're biased, it's because that's the entire nature of that board, that commission. That's their job, is to drive development. So it's an understood inherent bias, and I think we're asking them to give, or my suggestion would be to ask them to give development recommendations. We know what the non-development recommendations are. Don't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are implied. Those are very simple. What are really good, well thought out means for development? And then the other reason why I named them and suggested them is because I know they have a working budget, and many of our other boards, commissions, or other things in town do not have any spending authority whatsoever and cannot take on something like that. So there was a point behind me recommending them, and I appreciate you bringing it up because I probably didn't clearly state why they came to my mind. But yeah, you're 100% right. There's going to be a bias there, but it's an understood bias.
So, and I was wondering if well, again, me just thinking out loud, if it would be, if we can find the funds or requests for the funds, and as an independent source, the planning and zoning act as the intermediary on that and work with the consultant and, get a, hopefully what's considered an unbiased result sent out and
that would
provided
be-
to the public.
I think that would be even better. I just didn't know that it was something that POCD could have the spending authority to do.
Well, you can always ask. All right. Okay, very good. Yes,
I just-
Janet.
I just want to point out, I don't think that, I think there's a continuum here. It's not either or. There's some people who
Mhm.
certainly just want it to be a park, and there's some people who want 1 million square feet. But there's a whole bunch of people in the middle, and I think we need to find someplace in the middle that is reasonable for protection and is reasonable for possible development.
Yeah,
That-
it's a compromise, definitely. And even, if you just start playing with the numbers like I had up there, okay, so the next three groups after the Keep Ashford Rural still don't add up past 38.5%. However, they are a more center of the road, middle of the road suggestion and requests and what they're looking for. Smaller development, smaller size allowed in there that meets the town services and things like this. It's just, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know who it is that would be, after looking at a lot of different marketing plans and business plans from commercial manufacturers and retail and things like this. I don't know who thinks they would be able to fit in there. And that's where, as Luther said, as the EDC, if they can sniff out somebody who is interested in moving in there, then it turns into, well, what type of a building would you need? As you said, don't build for what we would like in there, but build what's effective, what meets the needs. And again, I keep using the chicken or the egg, and then seeing if that group can work within those confines, if the interested business can work within that structure.
Right.
So, but that puts a big yoke around the EDC to try and find that group and keep them on the hook long enough to, make a true consideration of what we're putting out there, what we're offering.
Yeah, and just to be abundantly clear, I'm not proposing that the EDC go out and find an investor or a group. I'm proposing that
Nope.
some town entity work with an independent advisory group to come up with recommendations for us to review.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the last time when Jeff Gordon came in and had his office hours, our state senator, I had asked him about the ability to reach out to his office regarding economic development and who's looking for something on this side of the state. What are they looking to do and where? And he was open to that. So maybe that's something, if they haven't already done it, pass on to the EDC to reach out to Mr. Gordon's office.
That's a good idea.
Okay. More to come, obviously, on that. We'll have further discussion. Last item under unfinished business. Reviewing the status of hybrid meetings for PZC. We said in the spring we would come back to this after the bad weather had passed and what our status is. I've had a discussion with Mike, and I've had a discussion with the selectman's office. Mike has worked with and Mike, if I say anything wrong, please set me straight. Mike has worked with our IT group we consult with about potentially changes to the large conference room that would allow for a more effective and robust hybrid meeting. It would allow for a panoramic view or a wide angle lens view of the board. It would allow for multiple microphones that we don't have to be within 6 feet like we are now with the OWL system that we have. And it doesn't, if someone's at the podium, you can't hear what they're saying unless they're right up against the owl system. And then, one of our other limitations being is that we are planning and zoning, and we have a requirement for recording our meetings, especially when it comes to possible litigation and hearings and such. If someone presents us, and if I got this is where I'm going a little off the reservation here, Mike. If we get a presentation, a site plan that's submitted to us at one of our meetings, and we don't have all our commissioners in-house, for the hybrid meeting, they dial in, or they zoom in to the meeting, they're online. Right now, we don't have a very good way, or any way really, of providing them with that material to review, to ask question, or, if a motion is made, be able to vote accurately on what is in the room that we might be looking at versus, they have nothing. Even in this case, like Jeff calling in wouldn't have access to that material. And, would probably need to abstain from a vote because he doesn't have that material to review in front of him. Mike, other issues, other thing I didn't touch upon, things I didn't reach out for?
No, I think you've covered it. We have a different set of obligations because most boards have meetings in public. They hear from the public comes up and they say, these are my thoughts. And then the chair says, thank you, and they return to their seats. Our process provides that people can show up to a public hearing because they saw notice in the paper and they can present their thoughts, but also can present exhibits during the public hearing. And that could be a letter, it could be a map, it could be a photo, could be a drawing, could be a 100-page report. And the challenge is if we have members of the commission that are not seated in the room, but participate in a vote, which may or may not have been impacted by the submission of a document that some of those members have not actually really seen, creates a little bit of an issue. So we need that functionality to really be in a position to provide an effective hybrid meeting. And we've had members of the commission express previously that if the commission were to go in person, they would be remote. And so we already know that we will have that need if we were to go to an in-person or partially in-person format. And statute says we have to accommodate a commissioner's request to be fully virtual, and that they need to be able to see, speak, and listen in real time as if they were there. So it's a bit of a challenge, but there's not a lot of work that needs to be done to the room. It's the town, whomever that is, just needs to basically move forward and authorize the work to be done.
And we do have a quote submitted to the selectman's office on that. The other thing, Mike, I'd asked you about requirements or requiring submission for the meeting. As you said, they can bring it into a hearing if they wanted to, as opposed to, and we really can't require early submission of that or submission in a timely fashion. What, this is like immediate. What about requiring an electronic version of it, whether it's an email or a flash drive that can be then put into the system to share with the commission member that's not in the room?
Yeah, I mean, that solves the problem in practice if you can get that, but because we don't always know who's coming, what they're going to say, and what they're going to have, a member of the public that wants to take a photo of, we had someone submit photos and articles about the dark sky or the night sky or all these things. We would have to have them digitize that so that I could then plug it in and share it or whatever. And it gets a little bit complicated. That would be a viable workaround, but it's
not in every case. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. So again, I know the selectman's office is looking at the proposal now that's out there for getting the room ready, and then it just would turn into how we can best accommodate to meet the state statutes for recording, allowing people to speak, allowing all commission members to gain access to the information. Life ain't easy. And that's not even taking into account, we'll deal with it if we have to, but taking into account that we have another situation where there are 200 people online, and we don't have a room to accommodate, the other 200 people who want to show up in person. We'll deal with that when we come to it. So that's kind of the status right now. So until the selectmen act on that, we are going to, be status quo. We're going to maintain with the virtual meetings until we can get the technology in place. Any questions? Comments? Okay, very good. We did new business, zoning officers report. Mike, anything to report?
So I've been working on several enforcement items, working to bring the RCN Lake Woods Lane project all across the finish line. It's been a little bit more involved than we expected, and we're at the point now where we've agreed on things. We're just working through the contracting with the bond language with Haller and Sage, working on some other items for the selectman's office, also with the town clerk on some website stuff, and the inland wetland agent about some stuff going on there. He had originally wanted to step back as of April, but is kind of hanging on, trying to cover the town while the town looks for a new agent. So I'm trying to work through some procedural stuff there so things continue to move and get his applications and things online so that people can submit 24/7 like they do on the building department. So things have been kind of busy.
Is that it?
That's all I got.
Okay, I just want to state that the website that Mike mentioned, the town will be going to a new website, and Mike, as well as Sherry Much, our town clerk, and Karen Zulik, the assistant town clerk, have been instrumental in getting that through and working on this. It will be and Mike, if I go off the rails, stop me, but it's a much more interactive plan for the work site, to the point where you can sign up for reminders and alerts that a agenda has been posted for planning and zoning, and it will tell you that the agenda is ready. You can go take a look at it on the website. Minutes have been posted for it. You can go take a look at that. Should you wish to, for most any of the commissions. I'm just talking planning and zoning right now. Mike, you're not ready, I don't mean now or even next month, but at some point you'd be ready to give us a preview of what we're going to be seeing, not so much in slides, but maybe in discussion as to some of the benefits of the new website.
Yeah, I think an explanation verbally of kind of how it will be set up and what functions and features it has, we could certainly go over. Where they build out the organization and the content, and then kind of add in all the touchy-feely graphics and animation and all those things. But I could definitely go over at the next meeting if you wanted sort of the main functional improvements.
If you have that information, if you're comfortable. If not, we can always wait for the next time. But I just think it's an exciting change for the town. Let me ask you this: does it have the potential to solve our problem about posting information?
Did you say hosting or posting?
Posting.
Yeah, I mean, it will have a more robust document library and place for agendas and minutes. And the vendor is Civic Plus. Probably half of the vendors that do town and school websites in Connecticut or towns rather, use Civic Plus as a vendor. So if you've been to another town website, chances are it was Civic Plus. That is the vendor. And so there's some integrations they'll be working on and some other things, but yeah, it should improve the functionality and our ability to post documents and host different things, PowerPoints, files, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Great. great. There'll be interesting information to see and hopefully easier access for most people when it comes to the website. Also at the next meeting, what I'd like to do is I'll see if I can find some updates on some of the legislation that was discussed the last time that was mentioned at the planning and zoning dinner that a number of us went to, and I had touched upon them, but I would like to follow up and see what the status is, if there are any movement in the legislature, even though the legislature, I just think closed. At least we'll find out if it got moved out of committee or if it just died right there, or if they're going to discuss it in the next session. So hopefully we'll have an update on that. That being said, we come to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move for an adjournment.
No, sorry, Janet. Nora was able to talk. You were on mute.
I'll second it.
Janet seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I'm not even going to go for the rest of it. Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention. Great discussion. Hopefully we'll have some movement. We have some assignments. Have a great week. Be safe.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.